What's going on YouTube? My name is Speed, you can call me JT, and in today's video, I'm going to be going ahead and ranking all of the best going second side deck cards for the current September 2022 Yu-Gi-Oh! Format. This post Power of the Elements format has been going on for about a month now, and I'm really enjoying how it's playing so far. But now that there's big events such as YCS Niagara and a bunch of regionals happening, it's time to get serious about one of the most important parts of deck building, the side deck. But before we get into that, I said in my last video that if we hit 200 subscribers, I'd do a little giveaway for you guys, and you guys absolutely smashed that goal. We hit 200 subscribers within the week of that video uploading, so thank you guys so much for letting me hit that goal. I really do appreciate everybody that has subscribed, and I am a man true of my word, so because we did hit 200 subscribers, I will be giving away this box of Power of the Elements to one lucky subscriber. All you have to do to enter is subscribe, like the video, and comment down below under this video whatever you want, really. I don't really have anything planned for this. Go ahead and comment down below under this video what your favorite deck of the current format is, and I'll be picking one subscriber who comments to win this box of Power of the Elements. Again, thank you guys so much for helping me hit 200 subscribers. It really does mean a lot. My next goal is to hit 300 by the end of the year, and I think if we keep seeing this level of support, I can hit that with no problem. But without further ado, let's get right into the video. So after playing this format for a little bit, I'm actually really enjoying where it's at right now. I think the format's in a pretty healthy state, and I don't think that there's too many cards that are completely unfun or unfair to play against, but trust me, we'll be getting into those shortly. But now that there's big events like YCS Niagara's coming up this weekend, and YCS Minnesota's in about a month, I think, and a whole bunch of like regionals and stuff obviously in between, it's time to sit down and figure out how we're going to be taking on these big decks and in these big events in terms of how our side deck is looking. So I have a whole bunch of side deck options here for specifically going second cards, and we're going to be tiering them based on, you know, their viability in the side deck and how much you should be prepared for them in your opponent's side decks going into these big events. So starting off with our first card here, I'm going to add another tier above S because Mystic Mine is just absolutely the best card in the game right now, without a doubt. As much as it pains me to say, you just have to be prepared for this card at this point. If you're not if you're playing it, it's gonna win you so many games. If you're not prepared for it, it's gonna lose you so many games. Up until this card gets banned, it should absolutely be played in your deck in some way, shape, or form. I'm personally maining 3 copies just because of how crazy that card is. I'm not ashamed to say it. It's won me a ton of games in the past, and I'm going to keep doing it up until the day this card is banned. Please, Konami, make that be soon. Next up, we have a challenging one right off the bat. Alpha the Master of Beasts. This is like a weird one. I do like Alpha because I do think it's like a boneless Pancratops in the way that can like just out so many problematic things. It's like a free 3k body that you can just summon for absolutely free. Attack over some sort of problem, like you can summon this against Sprite, attack over like an elf or a toad, and then main phase 2 bounce like something else. I do think it's really cool. The only thing that's holding it back, it is like not a quick effect, and it's just a 1-for-1 trade for the most part, unless you're playing a deck that's focused around like Wing Beast or stuff like that. But I do think that this card is pretty good. I'm probably gonna put it in like a B tier. You could definitely side deck this card and see some success, but I do wish it did like just a little bit more, but it is a pretty cool card in concept. Moving on to Change of Heart. So it's kind of hard to like rank side deck one-ofs because realistically, like, you're only going to see it about like 10% of the time across like a big event, if at all. But I feel like seeing Change of Heart even like in that many games, I feel like this card is really a game changer, right? Like, your opponent is basically forced to interact with this. If they don't, you get to pull some interaction from their board, or just pull like a body to, you know, get off their board. Like, everybody's ending on multiple bodies, so like having access to like this card to just steal one is really nice. It's not gonna like outright win you games, but I do feel like it's probably like an A tier card. Like, I definitely think you should strongly consider putting this in the side deck. It's only a one-of, so like if you have an extra spot in your side deck running, like lying around, I think putting Change of Heart in there like definitely couldn't hurt. I think this card is really good. Dark Ruler No More, absolutely S tier. This card should be ran in every single main or side deck. The question of this format ultimately is, are you going to play hand traps, or are you going to play board breakers? I'm personally biased towards board breakers. I think board breakers are the way to go. Dark Ruler is obviously the best board breaker other than Mystic Mine in the game right now. And again, if you're going to be playing any high level event, you have to be prepared for this card because it's going to be played in absolutely every single deck that you see this format for sure. On the other side with the hand traps, DD Crow is actually also an S tier side deck card for sure, if not like a main deck card. This is probably one of, if not the best hand traps in the format right now. The reason hand traps aren't really in a good spot is because most of them aren't high impact, and most of them just kind of 1-for-1 trade. And a high tier deck like Sprite or Tier, for the most part, will just play around those hand traps. The way that DD Crow kind of like differs from those is because yes, it is a 1-for-1 trade, discarding itself to get rid of a problem card. In a lot of cases, it will make the other player like think a little bit, right? Because if you're hitting something like a Ronin Toad against a Sprite player, or like a Tier names, or like anything that pretty much anything like a Tier player mills, they're going to be forced to overextend to a certain point, and that just opens the door to misplays or poor follow-up, stuff like that. So I feel like DD Crow is probably one of the more high impact hand traps in this current format. Another high impact hand trap in this format, Dimension Shifter. It's a little weird because not every single deck can play it, but obviously if your deck can play it, you should absolutely be at least side decking this card. Even if your deck can't really play it, like there's a lot of people playing Sprite that are side decking Dimension Shifter, even though it hurts them, just because Tier Limit is so prevalent in the current format. And this card just absolutely kills Tier Limit. Like they can't play for an entire turn, and on the crackback you can just kill them. So yeah, D-Shifter is just like, if you can play it, if your deck doesn't outright die, like if you're not playing Tier Limit, I think you should probably be playing this card in your side deck, even if it hurts your deck a little bit. Just past Tier Limit, like pretty much every other deck is gonna get hurt by this. Like if you're playing like Flunder, or you're playing another deck like Exo Sister that doesn't really care about having access to the graveyard, playing Dimension Shifter in the main, if not the side, is an absolute must for sure. Continuing with my favorite side deck cards of the format, Dino Pankratops is absolutely crazy. Again, like Change of Heart, it's kind of hard to rank because it is a one of, you're not going to see it in every single game that you sided in, but man, in the games that you see this card, it will make such a high impact. Like this card obviously just instantly outs most Sprite boards. Attacking over the Toad and then popping the Elf will literally just end the game against a lot of Sprite players unless they have Smashers. And again, if not, it's just another card that's going to instantly bait an interaction. If not, it's going to force multiple cards to get rid of. I play this card in every single one of my side decks, no matter what deck I'm playing in, or no matter what deck I'm playing this format. I think it's absolutely crazy. You should definitely, again, if you have an extra spot lying around in your side deck, you should definitely be playing Pankratops. Droll is, I feel like, way too specific in this format. It's like not terrible, but it doesn't really hurt like stuff like Tier and Sprite don't really get hurt that much against Droll unless they open up really poorly. I just think it's really specific. Like you can, if you know that your locals or stuff like that plays a lot of decks that get hurt by Droll, it can be good, but again, I don't really think like going into a big event that you should be considering Droll that much, unless you're playing like a ton of hand traps and you just have extra room lying around. You could play Droll, but I just don't think it's that good. Effect Veiler is another one that's like pretty good. I don't know if I'm gonna put it in A or B because like it is a good hand trap, but it just falls into the category of like hand traps overall this format, where just 1-for-1 interaction like that is just not enough, right? Tier Limit for the most part is going to play through one Effect Veiler. Sprite for the most part is going to play through one Effect Veiler unless you open up really poorly. I just think one hand traps that like offer 1-for-1 interaction are just not very good in this format. Like again, you could play Veiler and see some success with it, but in most of the matchups, I feel like this card just doesn't do enough. Econ is actually a really interesting one. I've seen this played a couple times. It's weird because it's not really like a board breaker type of card. Like you don't really use this card to break boards, but you use it to like almost bait interaction. So the way that I've seen this card played, right, is say you're playing like against a Sprite player, and or say, sorry, not Sprite player. Say you're like playing against a tier limit player, and you know they have Soliek, the trap imperm set. You can, summon a card, activate an effect, get them to bait out the Soliek, and then chain Econ to tribute the monster that they're targeting to negate and steal something from their board. So now your monster resolves, and you also mind control something from their board, which is pretty good. I do think it's a little specific, so I am gonna put it in B, just because like it's not gonna come up in every single game. But I do feel like this card is actually like pretty interesting, and it can catch your opponent off guard if you do actually get into a scenario where it's good. So I think like you can definitely consider siding Econ or even like main decking Econ, but it's not really gonna do too much. It's really just the surprise factor of like catching your opponent off guard with an interaction that they're not typically ready for is where the power from Econ actually comes from. Evenly is probably, it's either S or A. I think this card is really, really good. I think I'm gonna put evenly matched in S tier because you're gonna be seeing this card absolutely everywhere. It's evenly matched, right? Like this card is so good at like getting interaction, just not just getting interaction off the field, but getting it removed from the game for all intents and purposes. Like banishing cards face down is impossible to interact with for most decks. So just getting, it's one thing to be able to like clear a tier limit board, but they still have like graveyards set up, and if they had any names on board, you can still like trigger names and stuff. But getting those names like banished from the field and out of rotation forever is really, really good. The only thing that I think this card stumbles in is that there's a lot of interaction in the game that comes from cards that are not on field. Fairy Tale Snow is the biggest one right now. If a tier player has Snow in rotation, even if you evenly them, they still have forms of interaction to play with, especially if they keep another form of interaction on the board. But I do think evenly is very, very good. In most cases, it will be able to stop a lot of cards. Phantasme is another interesting one too. I was originally just gonna throw this card in C, but now that like Tierlman is moving towards like not link focus builds, but builds that are like trying to turbo a Curious and other link monsters like Topologic Zeraboros and Bomber Dragon and stuff like that, I think Phantasme could actually be seen to some success in this current format. Obviously, it doesn't do very well against Sprite, because if they turbo out Gigantic Sprite, then before they make a Link monster, then your Phantasme is dead. So you never really play this into a Sprite matchup, I think. Tierlament, it depends on the build, obviously, but again, now that more and more builds are moving towards this like Curious Turbo build, I think you could definitely side this in, just as, a way, especially if you're playing like board breaker cards, just as a way to like turbo through your deck even more, get to cards like Mystic Mine, like Dark Ruler no more, that are able to help you break boards and stuff like that. As well as, just having another big body on board. 2400 body is nothing to sneeze at, with built-in protection for your board from targeting, which can help you against cards like the Tier Limit Field Spell like the Tier Field Spell Paralino, like the Kaleido Heart, like the Soliek, stuff like that. Is also really good. So I do think this card is pretty underrated. It also really helps against anything that is not Sprite and also Tier Limit. Most of the rogue decks outside of like Flwandereeze and like Exo Sister, this card has a really, really good matchup. Like Rika Sun Avalon is a huge link spam deck. Dragon Link is still really, really popular. That's a good link spam deck that gets hurt by Phantasme. There's just a whole bunch of decks that this card actually hurts that you'll see across the landscape of especially regional tournaments. Maybe not so much YCSs, but regional tournaments for sure. You'll be seeing a wide array of decks that Phantasme can actually help against. Again, it is still a little bit too specific to be played, like considered in every single extra or side deck, but I do think that this card is actually very, very underrated for this format. Forbidden Droplet is, I'm gonna put this into A. It's not quite one of the best board breakers, but I do think in certain decks that this card is really, really good, especially decks that are still playing the Adventure Engine. This card is really, really good in being able to send cards like Draco back off the field for free, just as extra targets to be able to negate your opponent's entire board. I do think this card is really, really good in tandem with some other cards that are on this list. Just being able to like chain it to certain interactions to negate any possible interaction that your opponent's trying to use is really, really good. I do think Dark Ruler is probably better than this, just this format, but definitely keep an eye on this card, especially as it's getting yet another reprint and becomes more affordable. You'll start to see this card in a lot more side decks going forward. Galaxy Cyclone is an interesting one. I really don't feel like you would ever side deck Galaxy Cyclone. I feel like if you're playing Tearlament, which is really the only deck that's playing this card, you would already be maining this card at 1 just as an out to mine. I really don't feel like you would ever be side decking this card. A card that I didn't actually put on here is Night Beam, which is slightly better than Galaxy Cyclone. And not many people are side decking Night Beam at the current moment, so I honestly don't think you would ever consider side decking Galaxy Cyclone, even though if you are playing Tearlament, you should be at least playing one copy in your main deck, or if not your side deck, to combat the Mystic Mine that could hurt you. Next up, Kaijus. Kaijus are in a weird spot. They're a lot less prevalent now that Flunder is not as prevalent in the meta, and you don't have to worry as much about Barrier Stature or the Stormwinds. Kaijus are kind of in like the same boat as hand traps for me, where they're just kind of 1-for-1 removal, and most boards that you're going to be facing, unless you're facing like exclusively Adagnister players, are going to have multiple pieces of high impact interaction, both in monster form and in Backrow form. So Kaiju's just being like a 1-for-1 trade doesn't feel that impactful, although it is nice that it's just instant 1-for-1 removal. But I do think that there are better cards to play. Like, I guess I'll put it in B, because you can side Kaiju's if you can't side stuff like Lava Golem and Sphere Mode that we'll go over in a second. You can side Kaiju's and see some success, but at that point, like, you could just run like Dark Ruler no more and negate an entire board. Granted, like, they don't take damage for that turn, but I really don't see a scenario where you'd rather have a Kaiju than Dark Ruler, you know what I mean? So like, it's definitely like you can put it in your side deck and see some success, but I don't think it should heavily be considered to be played in the side deck. Next up, we have, these are just the Ghost Girl hand traps, Ash Blossom, Ghost Ogre, Ghost Belle, and Ghost Mourner. I kind of clumped them together even though they functionally do different things, because like, at the end of the day, they're all just one, again, same thing like as Effect Veiler, they're all just 1-for-1 trades with a certain interaction, and none of them are too high impact to really make a difference. The only one that I could consider like saying is, you know, apart from that, is like Ghost Ogre, specifically in the Sprite matchup. Using Ghost Ogre against Gigantic Sprite is really, really impactful. That's like only one certain interaction against one certain deck, right? So other than that, like Ghost Girls, I'm gonna put them probably in the same tier as Effect Failure here, just because, again, 1-for-1 trades and hand traps that are relatively low impact just aren't too good in the current format. Like, most decks are just going to be able to play through one Ash Blossom. Most decks are going to be able to play through one Ghost Belle. That you might catch like a deck off guard, or you might catch, you know, a deck in a poor situation, like where they just open very poorly and can't play through one Ash Blossom. But the majority, you know, across an entire tournament, you're not going to win many games because you opened one Ash Blossom. You know what I mean? So the Ghost Girls, again, and pretty much all hand traps that just trade 1-for-1 just don't do enough for me in this current format to really be considered side decking. Next up, we have Cherries, Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries. I think this card sucks. I've seen people like play it. I guess like if you're playing a deck that doesn't have an extra deck that's very tight, like you can play multiple cards in the extra deck, you can play this to like cover multiple matchups. But I've seen like people like run Cherries and run like one Kit Colosse and one Gigantic Sprite, and it's just like, I don't know, it does feel very like mid to me. This feels like a card like if you know that you're going to a local or a regional and you absolutely know that the entire room is going to be playing one or two specific decks, you can play this. But at that point, like, I don't know, you could probably play other cards. I'm gonna put cherries in C. Like, you can maybe see some success and it can catch people off guard, but like, it's just way too specific and just requires way too much investment for one card, in my personal opinion. Gizmek Uka, this one makes me really sad because I really like this card. I love Gizmek Uka and I wanted to test this card, especially against Sprite, using it to summon like a barrier statue after they use Sprite starter. But unfortunately, it's just way too specific and doesn't hit enough of the matchups in the format to be considered good. Maybe if Sprite was a little better and more popular in the TCG, maybe if it was like tier 0 as it was in the OCG, that Gizmek Uka would see a little bit more play, but unfortunately that is not the case in the TCG, so Uka kind of gets the short end of the stick. Even though I really do love this card and I want it to be good one day, it just not is right now. Same thing with our next card. No Material is just terrible. Like, this is like a worse version of a hand trap that trades 1-for-1, because like it doesn't even really do anything. Like, it's again, it's gonna make your it's a minor inconvenience to your opponent most of the time. Like, there is a very small possibility that you run into a matchup where this card just shuts down an entire deck, but those decks are just very slim to none, and they're probably bad decks already. I just would never play No Material. Feather Duster is another S tier side deck card. You should absolutely be playing this card. It's a one of, but the way I see it right now, I'm personally main decking Feather Duster in this current format. The way I see it is that every deck, no matter what you're playing, even if it's a combo deck, is playing some sort of back row, right? Sprite's playing Sprite Smashers. Tearlament's playing Soliek and other back row and stuff like that. The rogue decks, you have like Rika Sun Avalon plays Rika Sheet and Rivalry of the Warlords in the main deck. And you know, other decks just have, every deck is basically playing back row in this format, on top of the fact that obviously Mystic Mine is a problem card in the format once again. I personally think you should be main decking this card. Just again, it's a one of. If you have 39 cards in your main deck and you want to look for a 40th card, Feather Duster is a perfect card to have. Again, if anything, just as a main deck out to mine. But again, just because every deck in the format right now is playing some sort of back row, so having a card like Duster just to get rid of all that interaction is really nice. Imperm is actually interesting because it's another 1-for-1 hand trap. I'm actually gonna put Imperm a tier above the rest of the 1-for-1 hand traps. The only reason being is because I think this card is like a little bit more impactful, and it's also a nice way to use like the whole reason that I'm gonna put Imperm above a card like Effect Failure, right, is because you can use it both as a hand trap and as a semi board breaker, right? Of course, like, you know, this card was really important when Scythe Block was very prevalent in the meta, but still, like, it's still good being able to use it like as you know, like a first piece of interaction. Like if you top deck as your 6th card, using it just to force out a piece of interaction that you can't really force out with something like an Effect Failure. I think this card is slightly better. It's probably one of the more impactful hand traps in the current format, and I definitely think you could like use it and see some success with it for sure. Next up, Curry Card Div Incarnate. This card's so weird because I personally think this card sucks, right? Like, I don't think this card is any good at all, and it's just like it's a card that I feel like you absolutely need the surprise factor for this card to be any good. Like you have to be like the only person in the room playing this card. Your opponent has to have no idea that it's coming, and then you can catch them off guard in one game, and then they're gonna play around it, and then it's dead after that, right? So, like, again, this feels like a card that's like a one-time use of like a board breaker, right? It's like a card that you can use to catch opponent off guard. It might win you a game. It might not even win you the game like on its own. And again, and then after that, they know of its existence and they're just gonna play around it after that. I personally think this card sucks. I'm waiting for people to tell me or to convince me otherwise. Lava Golem. Lava Golem is interesting. I'm gonna actually put Lava Golem in A, not quite S, although you could probably make an argument for it to be an S tier card. Lava Golem in the decks that can play it, like decks that don't need their normal summon, is very, very good. The problem with this card lies in the fact that a lot of people will attempt to play around it once they know that it's a problem. But it is very nice because, like I said with Kaiju's earlier, is that people are ending on multiple pieces of interaction, and especially boards that end on multiple pieces of interaction on board, like Sprite. Being able to tribute over an elf plus a toad is really nice, and being able to like tribute over some tier fusions is really nice. But unfortunately, like I said with Dusters, that every single deck in the format is playing Backrow in addition to their monster heavy boards. So even though Lava Golem is going to get rid of 2 threats on the opponent's board, it's not going to wipe out the interaction completely for the most part against a lot of decks. But I do think this card is still very, very good. You should be aware of this for sure if you're going into a big event. Make sure, especially post side deck, that you are attempting to play around Lava Golem as best as possible so you don't just insta lose. Lightning Storm. I don't really have too much. I don't actually own Lightning Storms myself, so I don't actually have too much experience playing with this card. I feel like it's an S card, an S rated card on paper, but people also just play around this card so easily. You will always see people going first, setting their monsters in defense position, just to play around Lightning Storm and stuff like that. There are some exceptions to this rule. You'll never see a Sprite player put Toad in defense position because that card is puny. Anything can attack over if it's in the defense position, so you'll always see it put in an attack position. But other than that, I don't know. It kind of depends. Like it can be good. It can clear boards, but it can also just like not really do much. It's also good for clearing back row. It's probably the best back row clearer other than Feather Duster. But yeah, you should definitely like. I would say you should strongly consider playing this in the side deck if you have access to it for sure. It'll definitely it'll win you a game or two for sure. Nibiru, this is gonna be a controversial take, but I'm gonna put Nibiru in S. The one thing about Nibiru that makes it so good this format is that every single person thinks Nibiru sucks. I see so many. I saw this during the European Nationals a lot when I was watching that, is that there's a lot of people playing that are just not respecting Nib at all. Especially like Sprite players that are just overextending randomly, not going into Gigantic before they can get nibbed and stuff like that. Not many people are respecting Nib, and it's really, really impactful. It's really good against Tierlement now that they're moving into like danger heavy builds, turboing out Curious and stuff like that. Like if they don't play around Nib and they like summon 5 times before they can get into Curious, you can honestly just end their turn there. So I think this card is really, really good. And if you can, I would definitely consider side decking this card at least, if not main decking this card, because I do think it's really, really underrated this format, and not many people are respecting this card. Gamma is definitely going in A tier. This is probably A tier S. No, if I put DD Crow in S tier, I gotta put this in S tier as well. This is easily, other than D-Shifter, which is deck dependent, Gamma is probably the best hand trap in the format. It's offset by the fact that you do have to play a brick in the form of Driver, but Gamma is just, it's so good, man. Like, especially if you're playing a deck that plays a lot of cards that, you know, interact before you put a monster on board, like Sprite Starter, anything with the Adventure Engine, Tierlement, Paralino, stuff like that, that your opponent would want to interact with before you have to place a monster on the board. Gamma is really, really impactful, and obviously going second It's an absolute house. Being able to not only negate an effect but get the card off the field is absolutely massive in this current format. So I definitely think, you know, if you are opting to play a hand trap heavy build, I would definitely go for Gamma for sure. Raigeki's probably going to go in the same tier as Lightning Storm because they functionally do the same exact thing. Raigeki I think is actually a little bit better. Like if I was ordering this in like order of how good they were, I think I would actually put Raigeki ahead of Lightning Storm. I think Raigeki's really underrated right now, especially that it came back to 3. And it's not a once per turn, folks. This card was released in 2002. It doesn't say once per turn anywhere on it. So especially, you know, like I said earlier, how a lot of the interaction with these decks are coming not on the board as the start of your turn happens. What I mean by that is, you know, Tearlament has stuff like Fairy Tale Snow and Tearlament Havness that activate either in hand or in grave respectively, and don't actually appear on the board when you start your turn. Having a card like Raigeki that can be activated at any time and to be able to combat those is really good. Same thing with Sprite, you know, being able to hit something like if Sprite Elf revives something, or if they're playing the Winda version of the build. Well, that doesn't really work against Winda because Winda can't be destroyed by card effects, but you get what I mean. Like the whole point makes sense, right? A lot of decks are able to play on the opponent's turn, so having a card like Raigeki that can be activated at pretty much any time is really nice to have. I do think this card is really underrated. You should probably consider playing this if possible. Red Reboot's absolutely an S tier card. This is probably one of the best. It's easily one of the best cards in the game, right? Again, like I said earlier, and I'm gonna keep saying it, every single deck in the format is playing Backrow. Even more so post side deck. Every single deck in the format is playing some sort of side deck card for going first, whether it be a Pointer of the Red Lotus, whether it be like a Floodgate like Anti-Spell, Rivalry of the Warlords, Goes and Match, anything like that. Red Reboot just shits on them all. And like, this card is just absolutely insane. Again, this card should absolutely be priority #1 in every single side deck for sure. Super Poly is definitely an S tier card if you can play it. I mean, it's an S tier card, but I think I'm going to put it down to A just simply for the fact that not every single deck can play it. No, I put the Dimension Shifter in S. I have to put this in S too. This is easily like one of the best cards in the game, obviously. But this is like the reason why I don't like cherries at all, is because like if you're gonna spend multiple extra deck cards to make cherries live, just spend multiple extra deck cards to make Super Poly that much better. Like Super Poly is just going to instantly like obliterate your opponent, clear most of their board, any form of interaction if you play the right targets, obviously. And I also like it because it's also a going first board ender, right? Like you can side this in going first, set it, and then have interaction for your opponent's turn, as well as using it as a going second board breaker. So this card is absolutely insane. If you have room in the extra deck, or you have room in your side deck to side some targets for Super Poly, definitely make room for this card in your side deck going forward for sure. Sphere Mode is another interesting card, because like Lava Golem, it's able to get rid of multiple threats. And like I said, with Lava Golem, pretty much every deck is putting up multiple threats on the board. The problem is with Sphere Mode, and I actually did try this at the very beginning of the format, is that a lot of people were playing around this card and only ending on 2 monsters on the board, which is the case with actually a lot of decks for the most part. Like, I feel like, and this is another card that's like kind of like Curry Kara, right? Where if you use this once, people are going to know that it's there, and it's a lot easier to play around Sphere Mode than it is to play around a card like Lava Golem. So I do think Sphere Mode is just a little bit too specific. I think it's still good, but I definitely think like if you're going to play a card like this, definitely just play Lava Golem instead. It's going to be a lot easier. It's going to be the same amount of impact, and it's going to be live more often than I think Sphere Mode would be for sure. Triple Tactics. So this is obviously a card that has two different functionalities, I'd say, for going first and going second. In this case, we're going to be specifically talking about it for going second. I think this card is crazy, but I am going to put it in A tier specifically because it's not always great. You know what I mean? So the problem with Triple Tactics, right, is especially now in a format like this one where hand traps are falling out of favor, this card isn't going to be active in every single game. And like when you draw it going second, it's like it's impactful, but you obviously have to commit to something first. Like you have to be able to bait out interaction first and then be able to use this, and then have even more follow-up after that to actually play, right? And while there's a lot of decks in the format that can do that, I definitely think that like you have to consider like your deck before considering like if you're gonna play triple tack. I don't think you would like put triple tack into any single deck in the format. I'm personally playing it, but again, I've been playing Sprite for this format, and Sprite can easily play like the way I just said. Like I can easily bait out an interaction, activate triple tack, and then keep playing with the rest of the cards in my hand. I think this card's really, really crazy. But again, you should assess your deck first and then figure out like how, like if you can fit triple tack and if triple tack is actually good for your deck. But yeah, just being able to like mind control a monster from your opponent's board for free, or even just draw two to get into more gas after you've baited out a lot of interactions. Obviously, two really, really good effects. This card's really, really crazy. Next, we have like the back row removal, the quick play back row removal. So Twin Twister and Cosmic Cyclone. I think these cards, so like I'm gonna put these in A because you have to play some sort of back row removal, obviously. Obviously with Mystic Mine in the format, you have to play some form of back row removal to be able to get around that. And again, like I said earlier with the other back row cards, is that every single deck is playing back row. So having a card like Twin or Cosmic to be able to instantly get rid of those threats is really, really good. The only thing is that there's not many, there's like not many scenarios, I'd say, because Anti-Spell isn't seeing as much play from what I've seen, at least. Again, this is purely off of what I've seen so far for playing this format for a couple weeks. I haven't seen that many people playing Anti-Spell anymore, so having like a quick effect interaction to specifically Anti-Spell isn't really like that necessary, I'd say. In a lot of cases, I would think that just using Lightning Storm or Heartbeat's Feather Duster is probably going to do the job just as well, and you don't really need to side these in. But again, if you feel like you're really, really scared of back row decks like Eldritch and Flunder, and you're really, really scared of Mystic Mine, and you don't have that many outs to it, definitely load up on these in the side deck. Just make sure you have outs to back row at all times for sure. And then the last card on this list, wow, that actually went really fast. The last card we have on this list is actually Ultimate Slayer. So I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. I have exactly zero personal experience with this card. But from what I've seen, it doesn't really do enough, I'd say, which is crazy because this, like, it's obviously a crazy card being able to like, you know, send like either an Entis or a Trouble Sunny out anything on board and then be able to use the whatever you send to out another board is really, really good. This card instantly outs the Sprite board for free. But I just feel like it's a lot of investment. You have to invest extra deck spots, you have to invest main deck spots, and if you're going the route with the Trouble Sunny Evil Twin link, you have to invest another brick into your deck, being the big Evil Twin girl. And from what I've seen, like, this is a card that I feel like this is one of those cards where it's like, when you see it, it doesn't do enough, but when you don't see it, you wish you had it, kind of thing, if that kind of makes sense. Like, I feel like it's pretty powerful, but just not quite powerful enough. But I definitely think like you could side deck it and see some success. Obviously, because it can't be interacted with, it's like really good. So there's no real way to like play around it, I'd say, but I don't know, A or B, A or B, A or B, A or B. Leave in the comments below if I should put this in A or B. I'm gonna put it in A, just because I feel like on paper, like this card has to be really good. Again, like I said, I don't have any personal experience with this card. I know a few people who have tested it. They all say it's like I said, they all say it's good when it comes up, but it doesn't always come up, kind of thing. But I definitely think like you definitely could consider playing this in your extra deck or in your side deck if you have the space, for sure. And that's actually a really nice, like, sort of symmetrical end to our tier list. But that's going to be it for this going second side deck card tier list. If you want to see me make another video, I actually have another tier list made for going first side deck cards. If you want to see that video, definitely let me know in the comments down below, and I will get right to work on that video to be posted in the future. Again, make sure to subscribe and comment down below what your favorite deck in the format is to enter the giveaway for this nice box of Power of the Elements. I'll be choosing a winner for that sometime next week after this video gets enough comments that I want to pick a winner. But again, as always, thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate your the constant support. You guys are absolutely the best. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
That rhythm.